Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first in a series of webinars focusing on the science of healthy buildings. For those of you who are joining us today who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Smart. I am the Head of Sustainability Programmes at BEST, which is formerly was CSIC, which you probably know more than BEST, which stands for Built Environment Smarter Transformation. I'm delighted today to be joined by three excellent speakers. So we've got a lot to pack into the next hour. We have Bill Browning, Alina Gregorio and Tabitha Binding for today's webinar. But before we get underway, I've got a quick bit of housekeeping just so that we're all on the same page here. The session has been recorded and it will be available to everybody on, in the next couple of days. All participants are going to be on mute during the webinar, but we do encourage questions. So if I ask you to type any questions that you have into the question tab and press send, that will be picked up and we will have a question and answer session at the end of the three presentations to try and answer as many as we can. And we've got a couple of interactive polls this afternoon, which will be displayed on your screen. So please, we encourage you to participate in those as well. So just on that note, we'll kick off with a poll. That should come up on the screen shortly. So if you could all click the necessary buttons. So how aware are you all of the principles and benefits of biophilic design? Very limited, somewhat aware, quite aware, or very aware? So I will give you about 10-15 seconds to get that answered. Please just stay on the screen for about 15-20 seconds. Perfect. There we go. So about 50% very limited awareness and then a little bit somewhat aware. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a much better understanding. So that is enough from me, and you're not here to listen to what I've got to say. You're here to listen to our really good speakers. So I'll firstly introduce Bill Browning. Bill Browning is the managing partner in Terrapin Bright Green, an environmental strategy, research and consulting firm. His clients include Disney, Lucasfilm, Google, Bank of America, Salesforce, the White House and the Sydney 2000 Olympic Village. He began his research in human productivity and well-being in green buildings in the 1990s at the Rocky Mountain Institute, and he is co-author of a number of books, including Greening the Building and the Bottom Line, The Economies of Biophilia, and Nature Inside, a Biophilic Design Guide. His work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and many other high-profile publications and news channels. Welcome, Bill, if you'd like to share your screen.
Bill, if you can just unmute your mic, please. If you just hover over your face, it's down on the left-hand corner.
There, I think we are unmuted, correct?
Yep, we can hear you now. Yep, if you just...
Thank you for having me. And let me share the screen here. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the science and application of biophilic design. Particularly when we think about wood, there's been a fair amount of research over the years about preference for wood and even how much wood in a space makes a difference. The question we've asked, though, is sort of why do we have this response to wood that we don't have to other building materials? We think it has to do with connection to biophilia and connection to nature. The term biophilia comes from the social psychologist Erich Fromm, literally from the Greek words bios, life, and philia, love. The working definition most commonly see comes from E.O. Wilson's 1984 book, Biophilia. And so this is the one you most frequently see, the innately emotional affiliation of human beings to other living organisms. There are a number of threads of science in support of biophilia and a number of pieces that sort of underlie it. One is called the Savannah Hypothesis, saying that humans arrived on the savannas of Africa, and we have an affiliation for conditions that replicate some of the experiences there. One of the threads comes from Japan and Korea, a field of research called Shinryoku, which is looking at experiences in a forest. And what's been intriguing is they're looking at both psychological and physiological responses. Lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, but one of the more intriguing ones is that we see a drop in stress hormones, in particular cortisol. And for us, one of the pieces that has interested us is that, yes, you have that drop while you are having the experience in the forest, but after you leave the forest and come back to an urban setting or a more stressful setting, that lowered level of cortisol stays with you for an extended period of time. So this experience of nature isn't just a temporary effect. Why do we love wood so much? And why do we associate wood with nature? Some of it may be the way that we process information in the brain and identify objects. So there are a couple of threads. One is called semantic or associative processing, literally the brain going wood, tree, alive. And you'll see this happening when you ask someone and they say, you know, what is wood? And the response is, it's a natural material. What you're seeing is that subconscious process of the brain going wood, tree, alive. Wood is also sometimes what is described as a mass noun, right? We can look at a table, we can look at a clock, we can look at a chair, we can look at a bowl, all of which are made from wood, and we identify them as wood. And so we're not identifying, we're identifying it there by what it's made of, but also by the characteristics of the surface and the material itself. And so that's what cognitive scientist Irvin Beeman calls a mass noun. We identify the object by the materiality and its surface. So we wanted to really dig into a bunch of different things. We looked at touch response, so the tactile response to wood, and wood is perceived differently than when touching than other materials. And it seems to be that has to do with typically the surface of wood, because of its lower conductance than, say, metal or stone, is closer to the ambient temperature in a space in our perception. And that has definitely has a comfort level. But we don't think that's the overwhelming response. Some wood has a scent, and that scent can be quite powerful. We used to think that all the stuff around aromatherapy was just kind of bogus, but in recent years there's actually been some science that's getting pretty interesting. So for instance, around the compound of linalool, which is the predominant component of the scent of lavender, we know, at least in mice, and we assume the same neural pathways are activated in humans, is that that scent triggers the same neural pathways as Valium. And so it lowers anxiety, it lowers our stress level. And unlike the drugs, it does not, we don't build up resistance to it over time. More recent work was done on a compound found in a number of coniferous woods. So in particular, is research on stone pines. And stone pine wood has been used for centuries to build beds, to panel bedrooms and other portions of homes in Bavaria and Austria and Switzerland. It has a fairly distinct scent, and a component of that scent is limonene. And so in a research study looking at does this impact cardiovascular and stress characteristics of people sleeping in beds made from that material, they had people sleep for several weeks in a bed, stone pine bed, and then had them sleep in a replica of that bed made from particle board covered with plastic melamine that looked exactly like the stone pine bed. And what they found was the sleep characteristics and the cardiovascular performance of the people were substantially better sleeping in the actual stone pine bed than the replica stone pine bed. But, so would that be the overall response to wood? We think it's important, but in many cases we can't smell the wood in a space. We can, however, see the wood, and in particular we can see wood grain. And we think this is maybe one of the most important mechanisms. One of the things we know is that in the visual processing, if we have patterns that are radial or collinear, it's one set of neurons that processes collinear patterns or those sorts of patterns. And so because those sorts of things occur so frequently in nature, it's much easier for the brain to process them. That lowers our stress level. So collinear patterns are, think like this waving grass, or think like fur, or this chapel designed by Faye Jones. When we see a collinear pattern, so if we take our fingers and we put them in one direction, that's one set of neurons. If we turn our fingers 30 degrees, it's another set of neurons. But if the patterns are curving lines that move together, then the brain traces through that and processes it much easier. And when we think about wood grain, what is wood grain? Wood grain is a collinear pattern. And so its presence helps lower our stress. You also see nested contour patterns and modeling in wood that in effect is what's called a statistical fractal. So fractals are repeating patterns that occur again and again in nature. An exact fractal is mathematically exact at any scale. That doesn't occur very often in nature. What we tend to get are what are called statistical fractals. And statistical fractals are fractals that repeat with variations within them. So the bracts on a fern, the snowflake, the moving waves on a beach, or the little dancing flames in a fire. We're fascinated by them, and it really lights up a pleasure response in the brain. If it's not too complex, it is something that really can lower our stress, and we can actually measure that with galvanic skin testing. When we step into a space that has fractal patterns in it, has fractal characteristics, we can see an almost immediate drop in stress. And so the neuroscientists call this effect fractal fluency. We're so used to fractals in nature that when we see them in human designed objects, it's easier for the brain to process, and we have a lowered stress response. So if we collect all of the science together, we find 15 different experiences in nature that we can categorize into a pattern language. Now, pattern language has been used by designers and builders for centuries, but they tend to be object-based. In the 1970s, the work of Christopher Alexander and others shifted to add, let's think about patterns as a series of experiences that we could experience in the built environment. And so we have identified 15 of those. They fall into three broad categories: nature in the space, which are direct experiences of nature; natural analogs, which are indirect experiences of nature; and nature of the space, the three-dimensional characteristics of the space. In particular, wood falls into several of these. So one, all in the natural analogs. So material connection to nature. There you're seeing the semantic processing of seeing this material that we identify as being part of nature. Complexity and order gets at the fractal component, and the biomorphic forms gets at the collinear patterns. Now, 15 patterns is a lot to remember, and you certainly don't want implement all of them into one space. It would just be too overwhelming, and also we don't have the budget or the design time to do that. So one of the things that we've learned is that different patterns support different outcomes. And so if I know the outcome that I want to support in the space for those users, it helps me to filter and choose which of the patterns might be most appropriate for that space and that time. Some quick examples. This is a pop-up store that was designed by Kinga Kuma for Balextra, which makes luxury handbags. It was made from live edge, these live edge slabs, and people loved the space. And one of the things that they loved about it and remembered most strongly was actually the scent of the wood. But you also see the patterns and you make that connection to life. This is a space where you can visibly see the wood grain and the use of wood. This is a space to help calm children on the autism spectrum. So it's a break space adjoining a playground. And the playground is very nature-based, but the experience of being on the playground can be overstimulating for the children, for these children. And so this is a break space that uses several experiences of nature, including the use of wood, to help calm the children and give them a place to get away. This is one of our favorite uses of wood, a building that opened about a year ago. This is the Maggie Center, done by HonRICS Studio. It's a mass timber building. The form of the building is essentially 3 trees with a garden planted on top of the trees. Inside of the trees, in those tree trunks, are the private meeting rooms, and then the public spaces are interwoven between those. The wood is minimally lime washed so that you can still see the grain, but also so that as this building ages, it will have a beautiful patina. It's a really, really extraordinary building. So finally, a little bit about application. So when we think about spaces, we have lots and lots of different users. If we think about an airport, not even talking about the staff, just thinking about the different passengers, we realize that there are lots of different passengers and they have different experiences. So the business person arrives and she comes by a ride share. She has already checked in on her phone. She doesn't have a bag. She breezes through security because she's pre-screened, and she actually doesn't really sort of get stressed until she's sitting at the gate waiting to board. The family, on the other hand, with little kids, it's kind of crazy all the way until they get to the play area for the kids. And so what you see where people are stressed are these shaded boxes, and underneath it, you'll notice that their path is hashed where they're stressed. That translates into a plan. And so this is a 4,400 square meter space. This is the airport terminal in Portland, Oregon. And for the Port Authority and the design team, ZGF, the head of that, this was really an effort to think about how do we make the best possible experience for passengers, in particular, how do we lower their stress? And so here are those different passengers and their paths from entering through ticketing, through baggage drop, through security, and then into some of the retail spaces before heading to their gate. You'll see the hashed lines tell us where they're stressed. And given that this is such a huge space, it's 10 acres in size, you can't do interventions everywhere. And so the point was to pick the most opportune places. And you'll notice there's a place where you come out of the baggage and ticketing, and you first see the security, that transition that's called the seam. And you'll notice there's a lot of overlapping stress lines there. And so that was one of the places for the major interventions. So here is that space. This is the seam. The seam is got a huge skylight over it. It has fins on slats on the edge, so you get a really incredible dappled light. So you get a statistical fractal on the floor. You have plantings that replicate the experience in local forests. And you'll notice that this entire structure is wood. This is a mass timber structure. It was all locally sourced on long rotation harvest, so that it actually sequesters more carbon than it takes to build this massive structure. And then so it actually offsets some of the steel and concrete and the rest of the building. Now you'll also notice that there's this Douglas fir slats in it. So here we have those collinear patterns with curvature in them. And so just looking at it, we get the pattern of the wood grain, but we also get the larger collinear pattern that's occurring within it to lower our stress. And so this is a very large example of wood as a biophilic strategy. If you want to read more, there's a specific paper on wood called The Nature of Wood and 14 Patterns and Economics of Biophilia that can be downloaded from our website, along with lots of other publications on biophilia. If you want to dive into interior design and design related to this, we have the book that was commissioned by the Royal Institute of British Architects, Nature Inside, that's available through RIBA, Routledge, Amazon, and other sources. Thank you.
Bill, thank you so much. Oh, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Thank you so much for that, Bill. That was really, really interesting. And can I just ask everybody, if you've got any questions for Bill, please pop them in the chat and we'll pick them up after our next two speakers. So moving on, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Alina Gregorio is a London-based interior designer, sustainability and wellness expert. She is the co-founder of Grigoriou Interiors, one of the UK's most forward-thinking design and sustainability studios. She has 20 years experience in the global commercial interior design sector, and she has extensive knowledge of human-centric design, and that is complemented by an eye for aesthetics and an in-depth sustainability know-how. Alina works at the heart of the latest industry developments and initiatives regarding sustainability, net zero and circular design. Alina, over to you. I can ask you to share your screen now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a lovely intro. I always think of those years and hopefully they're paying off now. It's actually a real honour to follow Bill on this event, and I'm a big fan of the work that he's done over the years. Well thumbed through documents there that he showed at the end, so really, really great. Now, my focus is as an interior designer to look at how do we take all of this science, all of this wonderful research, and put that into practice in commercial, residential, institutional kind of conditions. How do we manage all of this know-how and the philosophy and the science into, let's say, the day-to-day application in the design process itself? So this is no easy feat when you have so many stressful requirements to meet at the same time, such as time restrictions, budget restrictions, team skill, client understanding. So you've got a lot of issues to manage when you're delivering this. And overall, let's say we're moving closer towards a better product than not when we do this. So I'm going to focus on how do we actually take all of this and understand it in the design process, and some of the tools that I use and have tried and tested in practice in different interior refurbishment and fit out projects over time. So I'm going to share a few slides here now, but overall, let's say the premise of the application has been mostly commercial interiors, where you're looking at business drivers or maybe educational drivers. So we're going to follow some of those through. But first of all, kind of what are we looking at? And we're looking at people and space. And the most important thing, which I always remind our clients and other fellow design team professionals, is that really what matters here is how people are going to feel and live and be inside a space, rather than actually how beautiful is this one object going to look like in the space in itself. The value itself of what we're designing and doing is really in how people are going to live and exist in these spaces and achieve the targets of what a good life looks like. And this is really important because we can forget sometimes what really is the aim of our projects. So we're looking at how people are going to live and be inside spaces, and we have many different types of people, and they're doing many different types of things and activities. But every single person is affected in a similar way, and I know Bill has covered many of those aspects already in a fantastic way, so I'm just going to touch upon them lightly. So we're looking at supporting people inside spaces, and that is supporting the body and how that feels, the emotions and how they're experienced and influenced, and the mind, how that actually processes, is enabled to do what we call thinking. So understanding those three and understanding that every design that we're creating is affecting, whether we like it or not, those three is really important to understanding whether we're going to actually achieve good design or not. So we're trying to go from maybe an effect that feels like this. So many of us can have days where we're feeling like this. We're feeling really low, we're closing up, we're not able to communicate with the world around us, we're not maybe able to think clearly, we're not able to access memory, we're not able to communicate how we feel to somebody else, and we may snap at them. Or we want to avoid people and avoid tackling a big problem that we've got to face. That isn't a description of a flourishing life, but it is part of life. But how does the space then enable or support that movement from that to one that is what we'll call, and maybe we refer to very broadly as, flourishing? How do we allow ourselves to be in a state of being where we can understand our emotions, we can understand our fellow human emotions around us, we can exchange what those are, we can think clearly and access our memory clearly, and our body can feel light and refreshed. So really our resilience, our whole kind of energy and zest for life is moving towards growth rather than a coping mechanism. So we're looking at a different tiered level, let's say, of being, states of being. So one is healthy or health. How are the spaces that we live in support health or remove it? So the ability of spaces is there to remove health from our bodies and our minds. The ability they have then is to support comfort. It's not just enough to be healthy, but you've also got to be comfortable. So then you're looking at a plus. Now, once we have enabled comfort in the mind, in the body, and the emotional state, we can then choose as individuals to be well. Well-being cannot be given to us by spaces. It's not something any designer can give you. So I can't give you all right now your well-being. What I can do is remove some of your comfort that then is using your resilience to cope with something that may be a negative factor. So somebody may say something cutting to you, right? And that would affect your emotional state. There you'll use some of your resilience perhaps to cope with that. And the same thing with a cold room. You can only stand it for so long, however long your resilience may be. If you're really tired, you're not going to cope with it very well and very long. You're going to feel colder quicker. So well-being is something we can enable, but we cannot give it. And the idea that, of course, performance then in a workplace setting, in an educational setting, or even in a hotel with the performance of people sleeping well, right? We sleep, that's a performance. How well are we doing the tasks that are intended in every single space that we live in, whether that's for 1 hour, once a year, or actually 9 to 5, 5 days a week? Performance is completely linked to well-being and how comfortable we will feel in a space. And these, so comfort and beauty, so I'm introducing the concept of beauty here, because that again is a biophilic feature and is very much an effect that we will create to support or not a sense of well-being. So when we're looking to design spaces, there's two things we need to sort of look at, and in practice. Beauty. Have we got a type of beauty that supports how people feel in a space and the particular users of the particular space? And what are the levels of comfort? And when I'm saying comfort, generally in the design industry, it's used as thermal comfort. But we're looking also at color comfort, textural comfort, ergonomic comfort, right? So the comfort in general captures every single design feature that is encompassed in the design of an interior space. So we have evidence, and again, Bill has covered a lot of these in a fantastic way. So I'm just going to show you two examples where in a feature light fitting in some interiors, you can choose two different ways to impact people. And you're either going to support or not the activities that are going on in there. Now, if I asked you to choose which of these two light features you would feel comfortable to relax underneath, make a choice. And which of these two light features would you feel comfortable to be stimulated, concentrated, and have a very, very dynamic conversation with somebody? Now, we know that fractals and lines and sharp objects raise alarm bells, let's say, in us, very simplistically. And curved patterns and organic shapes, softer things, don't. So we can use intentionally design and patterns to support or not in practice how we design and how we want people to particularly feel in a space. Now, generally, biophilia gets linked with the idea of creating calm. I don't sign up to that completely because we want some stimulation in certain parts of our lives to perform well and to do what we want to do. If we were all just calm all the time, then actually we will all be sitting back in a chaise longue and not really doing and growing at the edges of our own capacity. So we want a little bit of stimulation inside the spaces we live in and in our lives. And that is actually part of biophilia in itself. But how do we design that in? What does it look like? So it looks like those kind of features. Putting in features that either are higher or lower biophilia, depending on what is needed by the users themselves. So you could have wood that is very rough and raw like this, which actually could imply something that's more natural, more unregulated. Or it could be something that's extremely refined and regulated and controlled. Which one is going to be supporting or not the comfort of users inside a space? And that will depend on the users themselves. Here's an example, let's say, of a project that we work with. I purposely use unprofessional photography because those are the spaces and how they look in our real life. So here is a before, where you've got a classroom scenario where actually a lot of the professors were not able to teach in the highest performance that they wanted to. And part of that solution was mobility, textural ability, sense of space, when we broke it down. And this is the after photos. Now, we introduced elements of wood and nature to a level that was relevant to what the users themselves would find comfortable. And again, there's a process behind that. But saying that we're going to do everything of wood or everything of nature or looking like nature, well, it's not quite providing then the level of comfort and performance that this particular location required. So let's take two textures from that space. So here we have the wood that is quite processed. So it's showing the hand of man in the activity to control it and create, of course, a fluency there in pattern and repetition. So again, these are natural features. So we'll call them biophilia. And you have them in both situations of these two materials, one more processed than the other, or at least it looks like more processed than the other, but both of them give an element of nature in the space and a reminder of nature in the space. So of course they'll provide more calmness where it's needed. So within the process of design itself, we use these tools which we call user profiles. Here we're trying to understand, well, how comfortable is every particular user of a particular space to nature? There are people that I know who are afraid of having trees in cities because they grew up in a city. So saying that we all have inherently sort of an Amazon lookalike space in our fantasies as the perfect interior that's going to give us comfort, well-being, and performance is actually perhaps questionable now. And this is what really understanding where users are on that journey of comfort and well-being is really important to understand which is going to be the most harmonious interior design for them in that situation. So we create tools such as the user profiles that give an understanding to the whole team of where we are in the design itself and the design characteristics. And this is important not just for the people who are specifying patterns and products, but it's also for the mechanical and the electrical consultants on a project. For example, a natural flow of air is much more comforting than one that's mechanical and has no rhythm in it. So all of that can be understood from here and then harmonized with that level that's needed. So here I've just got a very quick sort of touch point of how we understand occupants and where they are as a lifestyle and what they are looking for in life as comfortable, aspirational, and makes them feel that they're comfortable in their own skin. So different texture patterns, and again, the wood here that I've got is understanding if somebody wants something less refined or more refined, what does that mean in the design that we are creating? And here I've got a few examples of textures that we would use to actually create more stimulation or less stimulation, and that would relate to activities such as concentration or creativity. So different users would like a different depth of texture, a different amount of shadowing, hard or soft, and also a combination of hard and soft. And these will all reflect in user behavior and culture of these different maybe companies, organizations. So again, a few of the areas here that we would look at. So one is balance, symmetry or asymmetry. So in nature, we have a lot of symmetry. And when we have asymmetry, it creates an alarm. Something's quite wrong. Something's changed. It's not wrong, it's change. So as humans, we react to this with attention. We give it attention as a sense of survival. So if we create asymmetry in a design, does it actually capture our attention? So we can use all of these areas as part of that process. Now we also look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and have created a scale of where all the physical features in an interior space then actually come into that sort of hierarchy of basic and survival towards actually self-actualization. Because the main feature that we've seen is, of course, that if you try and achieve something that's higher up on the hierarchy, that maybe you're giving cake to people that are starving, is actually not going to satisfy them for long term, and every project is going to waste money and also think that the process isn't quite working when you're actually not giving those people what they need and you're not fulfilling some more basic parameters of their needs. So it's really important to understand in a project when we've got budgets, design features, existing building limitations, well, what should we prioritize? What's going to give more value and be more long-term a comfort to users than short-term, because we think actually that's more flashy or more catchy. And I think an understanding of what is overall going to be a support to user comfort is also a negotiation. So we have environmental issues at the moment that, of course, we do have to tackle. Now, the more passive a design is, the more it captures both well-being and environmental issues. But we have got existing buildings where many of them are not passive designed, for example, so we are tackling some conflicting issues and drivers. That's my timer. So when we're looking at an overall design, there will be some issues that we can design to support user comfort, but maybe we also need to look at sort of operational solutions. And this is where it's really important to understand how is a space going to be used and what's that sort of dynamic relationship between a user and space, because it's not static. Even if we design the most perfect design features in a project, the users have to know how to engage with it in practice and ongoing, not just because the current design team has moved on, then no one knows how to operate it or use or behave in a specific building. So here's just a few examples that are going from more kind of natural, and I'll call biophilic very loosely, to less. So here we've got some natural textures coming through, some stone, some literally raw pieces of wood being introduced inside an interior space with openable windows and natural airflows coming through, to spaces that have got an understanding of color, differentiation, flow, fractals, to something that is much less and is basically pretty much zero biophilia. So again, these are not right or wrong in themselves, but actually understanding where is the occupant and user at the time and what's going to make them feel from this to this. But actually maybe it doesn't matter, because actually the resilience of people matters more because they can cope from those different states every single day. So I'm just going to close off with a pitch. I've got only one book. I know Bill had 3 there and he's got so many papers and amazing work. But I've got one, and special one. So if you want to know more, please do look it up. It's also from the RIBA and can be found in local and major bookshops. But thank you very much, and I hope to answer some Q&A sessions in a bit.
Thank you so much, Elina. Lots for us to think about there. And just to let everybody know, the books and links that were shared, we'll make sure that you all get these after that, if you haven't managed to scribble them down in the time of the presentation. So on to our final speaker of this afternoon. I'd like to introduce Tabitha Binding. Tabitha leads on education and engagement for Timber Development UK, working with industry, academia, professionals and students to enthuse, encourage and educate. She's passing on her knowledge about all things timber to them and to you today. Her speciality is interdisciplinary project-based learning that breaks down barriers between professions and facilitates dynamic learning. Her background is in forestry, milling, manufacturing, new build and renovation, along with research, product development, monitoring, certification and policy. Welcome, Tabitha, if you'd like to share your screen.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Lovely. So thank you for the introduction. So yes, I represent Timber Development UK, which has been a recent merger of the Timber Trade Federation and TRADA. And I was asked to speak about let me go back one, just the science of healthy buildings. But can we have healthy buildings if we don't have a healthy planet? So definitely different to Bill and Elina, but I know time's moving onwards. Human activities are increasing the level of greenhouse gases, and construction counts for 40% or more of these emissions. And temperatures are increasing due to increases in those greenhouse gases. Climate change will affect human health across so many different fields, whether it's exposure with its social and behavioural context, whether it's environmental and institutional context, it will all have health outcomes. We need to consider the social and ecological footprint at an individual level, at a country level, and at a global level, and how our choice of the materials we use will affect other human lives and others' ability to enjoy their lives. Some products include chemicals that are harmful to human health. So how can we have a healthy building if they include these chemicals? Will your building make a positive or a negative impact? Or could it be sustainable as a minimum, or restorative, or even regenerative? And will the materials you use be renewable? Will they be bio-based which look up carbon and give off oxygen during their growth? Or will they be non-renewable, fossil fuel based? And what makes a healthy new home? This is the diagram from Herefordshire, who've been looking into how they specify their new homes. They're looking for excellent thermal insulation, so hardly any heating is required, and the heating costs are reduced, eradicating fuel poverty. They're looking at carefully designed triple glazed windows that benefit from importing the useful winter sunshine, but also have like brise soleil to stop overheating within the summer. They're looking at no gas boilers, which use polluting fossil fuel, but electric heat pumps from renewable resources. They're looking at solar panels and then heat recovery with ventilation, so that's MVHR. Now, we talk about natural ventilation, and there's always an argument between whether natural ventilation or mechanical ventilation with heat recovery is better. But recently, there's been a new app or a new website where you can actually look at what the outdoor air quality is. Well worth having a look. I forgot to add the link to this slide, but I'll pass it on afterwards. If we're looking at old homes, what makes a healthy old home when we know we need to retrofit thousands or hundreds of thousands, if not millions of homes, and every choice we make will impact on all the current materials that are in that building? So the Sustainable Traditional Building Alliance have a very useful guidance wheel. And will those products that then we use to retrofit and maybe insulate our homes be bio-based? Will they be suitable for that application? Will they stop interstitial condensation building up within those walls? That's what we often call breathable, so that they absorb and desorb moisture as and when necessary. And the diagram here on the left includes cork and lime with hemp in it. And this is the materials that I used on my own home, which is an 1840s terraced house in mid Wales. And I must admit, I monitor my relative humidity and my temperature, and it does very well. Trada, back in 2019, brought out a briefing paper on the role of wood in healthy buildings. And it asked what makes a building healthy? What are the regulations and certification? What is the evidence for using timber and wood products within those healthy buildings? How do you specify the timber that goes into them? And what is the future for those buildings? In Australia, they did some research into the benefits of wood and work and how we actually could improve productivity and absenteeism. Definitely well worth going and having a read. And a step back, I tried a research summary in 2018. So in 1995, Hal Levine defined a healthy building as one that adversely affects neither the health of the occupants nor the larger environment. But we need to move beyond this to make positive and regenerative impacts. So this research summary covers the healthy buildings. What's the benefits of them? What are volatile organic compounds? What is building comfort? How does timber and wood products affect the health and improve the healthy buildings? How do you specify timber that goes within them? And what could be the post-building issues? And it ends up with not just build tight and ventilate right, but actually build healthy, build tight and ventilate right. And on that is where the Passive House Trust come in. So they've recently released or part released a guidance details of the benefits. So the benefits of building to an energy and comfort standard and monitoring that. So looking at the building performance and how that impacts on the health and well-being of the people that inhabit those buildings, whether it's office or whether it's schools or hospitals or actually homes. and how people perform better within these buildings. They also look at the financial, they look at the social, and again, they look at the climate emergency. So some case studies or case examples, these are all taken from the TRADA website. So this is Maggie's Oxford Centre. This was by Wilkinson Eyre Architects. So this treehouse concept and the use of timber fulfilled a vital requirement of the brief, one common to all Maggie's centres. The visitors should experience a tranquil yet friendly interior, informal and decidedly non-clinical. And then look at the Enterprise Centre in Norwich, a building which is sustainable in every sense, natural, local, low carbon, and the first large-scale commercial building in the UK to achieve both Passive House standards and BREEAM outstanding rating. It demonstrates how materials, especially timber, can be sourced locally, used in innovative ways, and designed to create an alternative aesthetic that strives to be genuinely local and reflects the surrounding vernacular and embeds the building into its regional context. Now, the architects on this building are Archetype, and they've done a huge amount of research into monitoring building, whether they're schools or university buildings. Sorry, my light's gone off. I've obviously been sitting too long. And Maggie's Oldham, which I've had the benefit of actually going to. So this is by DRMM Architects. And here they've used timber within the walls, within the roof, within the cladding. It's used in all different formats, from cross-laminated timber to tulip wood to modified timber. There's kitchen sort of worktop, which has the waney edge on it, so that's a natural plank, as you saw through. And the yellow floor is there to lift not only the mood, but any sallow skin you might have if you are suffering from cancer. And going into this building, it is like going into a warm wooden hug, and definitely recommend going in and seeing it. And if you download the case study, you'll get all the details. And then just one final to wrap up on, the Dyson Centre for Neonatal Care in Bath. This is by Field and Clegg Bradley Studios. So it cares for more than 500 premature and sick newborn babies each year. It's been designed as a template to show how good, sustainable healthcare design can be achieved, setting a benchmark for good practice and creating a therapeutic environment to benefit parents, children and staff. So we have so many species of timber. We have so many different timber products. It's about choosing the right product to put in the right place for the right effects, whether it be in the interior design, whether the structure of the building, or whether what it's clad in. The ASBP have been running a healthy building conference from 2017, and all of their information is there online for you to go back and read or watch. And one final question: how are you going to create healthy buildings?
Thank you, Tabitha. In fact, thank you all of our speakers this afternoon. That has been absolutely fascinating. I don't believe you can see me just now, but wait a minute. Hopefully I'll appear on screen. There we are. There we go, everybody. Brilliant. Right, we're just about to come to our Q&A session, and we've got a few questions for our panelists, so I will ask them all to just get ready and come back on screen. But before we do that, I have a second poll for you all. If you could just answer this question. So do you currently feel that your own office or working space enhances your well-being? Yes, a little, or not at all? Just get a few seconds to complete that, and the answers will just ping up on our screen shortly. Mostly yes, a little. So, but still a little bit room for improvement. So hopefully, some of the things you've heard about today, you can take back to the workplace and enhance your own working environment. So, we only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask a few questions for you all. So we've got one in here for Bill. So what do you think is the biggest challenge to getting clients or designers to embrace biophilic design?
Helping them understand that it has real economic benefits. We wrote a publication called The Economics of Biophilics to start attaching the financial numbers to this, and we're working on a new edition of it. They are typically interested in the health and well-being, but what usually pushes them over the line is the financial benefit.
Absolutely. Tabitha, Alina, have you got any more to add?
Yes, I think there's, and I'd say it's probably a recent change that I find value metrics that are beyond just economics now, or direct economics, are also creating hooks in understanding and leveraging change. Staff retention, especially around COVID, that just came to its own, to understand how much people are able to cope, and that necessarily can translate in money, but not directly in many occasions, and it creates critical problems in other areas. So I think it's been an issue of time. We just needed time for this to understand. So Bill, that paper 100%, I've flicked through that so many times. Awesome, can't recommend it enough. And I would just say, yeah, can we have another one, please, Bill? Can we have more? It's awesome work.
We're hoping to have the new edition out in September.
Oh, fantastic. Yay. So I just think that, yes, to what Bill said, but I think there's more leverage of value beyond just monetary now.
Fabulous.
I think, Jennifer, just some of the research that Archetype have done within schools, and actually how people are learning better and heart rates are lower and there's less stress and more concentration.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely need to get that message out. And this is the whole benefit of this series of webinars, is to really start educate the importance of it. And then the next webinar we're going to be doing is about seeing how this works in practice. So really focusing on those case studies to showcase how it's done and the benefits of that. I've got a question here for you, Tabitha. So do you think that the timber industry needs to do more to highlight the ways wood and design can benefit the health and well-being of occupants?
Definitely. When we look at the two papers that I highlighted from 2018 and 2019, I mean, we've moved on a long way since there. So we don't make enough of it. How using, say, wood fibre can ameliorate the peaks and troughs of temperature, highs and lows. How sound absorption. Poplar is a really good sound absorbing material that probably is not being promoted widely enough. And then they say the use of timber flooring, a very natural material that can be sanded down time and time again. And
Absolutely. No, fabulous. I'm conscious of time. Got one final question for Elina. So you were talking about well-being being sort of unique to users, sort of for yourself personally. So what does a well-designed space that enhances your well-being look like to you?
Thank you very much. So for myself, I mean, there's a lot of user controllability about it, and definitely tailoring, an understanding of where I can actually go in emotionally. So I need a space that can give me a really strong grounding for my emotions when I'm feeling very stimulated. So that really needs, and that will be stronger textures, basically, deeper colors, more saturated colors, sense of height and space, or where I can actually allow my eyes to travel. So allowing eyes to travel can allow us then to introspect and nourish our emotional state. So we need all of those to help ourselves, basically. So yeah, does that answer the question?
It does indeed. It does indeed. I'll just ask quickly because it's really interesting. What both to Tabitha and to Bill, what would be your space? What kind of things would be your space? Lots of wood in it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Sorry, I do. I have a sycamore table. I call it my antique of the future. I know exactly where the timber came from. I love the grain pattern on it, the knots, the what's the name, and then I have an oak staircase. And again, I asked for all what people would assume to be defects in there. But it's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's really natural, and it's lovely. And that really, sorry.
That's absolutely perfect. Bill, what about you?
Yeah, my place is filled with American craftsman furniture, which is typically made with highly grained red oak and sometimes even quarter sawn, so you get even more layers of the patterns in it. And it's just extraordinarily beautiful.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much all. We've got one final poll of the day. It's up on the screen now, so if you just take a second to fill that in. Following on from that last question, as if it was planned, out of the following materials in a room, what would make you personally feel the most calm, relaxed or happy? You see there's a few options up there on the screen. Oh, there we go, 95, well, there we go. Again, like it was planned. Fabulous. Right, it's only for me to thank the audience. Thank you very much for joining us for this seminar at lunchtime, and hope you got a lot from it. I certainly did. As I mentioned earlier on, there will be another session probably later on in May, but when we issue the details with the webinar from today, the recording and some of the links and things, we will give you details of the next webinar. And thank you very, very much to our three speakers here today. It has been really, really educational and thought-provoking. So thank you all, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.